Jean-Marie Le Pen. But I see that somebody does not agree with that. Maybe we can talk about that after. Okay, that's good. So Jean-Marie Le Pen, around the 80s, he was criticizing laicity, or even he didn't talk about it. Right? And around 2000, everybody talked about laicity and was for it. I mean, not everybody, but when you look at the polls, you can see that it's between 60 and 80% of the population that are attached to laicity, which wasn't the case in the 70s and the 80s. You have the real split on that. So what happened? I think when we think about it, the liberal orientation of laicity is actually, on the contrary, what think people that are supposed to be very rationalist and positivist, is the one that is closer to the idea of what is secularism, what is modernity. Because what is modernity? Modernity is not specifically about rationality. Rationality, but even etymologically, that just means that when you are in front of a problem, ratio, that means you divide the problem in little pieces. It's the reason why in your calculator you have the ratio. It's just to divide the problem. That's just a methodology. It's just what it is. It's not supposed to be something else, right? And so when we talk about modernity also, what does it mean? It means, for the first time, supposed to be, the first time in history, at least the fathers of modernity thought so, that you can live on the same space, social and legal space, with different modes of being. Modernity is different modes of being, meaning also modes of believing on the same public space, protected by the law. That's what is modernity about. And even if you read, because earlier we were talking about Heidegger. Heidegger wrote something, a little book that is very interesting. It's called The Epoch, or the Time of the Conceptions of the World. He said modernity is not a new conception of the world. Because if it were a new conception of the world, it would substitute to religion and it would become doctrinal. It would become a doctrine. Modernity is the time of conception of the world. That means it is the time when we consider that exists other conception of the world that can coexist, that can exist on the same space and live all together. It's what is modernity, even in Heidegger's philosophy. Even if you read Immanuel Kant, one of the main fathers of what is called modernity, you have a little chapter in the Critics of Pure Reason that is called about rational faith. And some people think it's faith in rationality. Not at all. It is just what if you read it, it's like the 1905 law. I mean, you might read it to understand it. It is written in it that it is rational to have faith, meaning we can't deduce the absolute for what we see, but we have to postulate. That's the postulation of pure practical reason. You have to postulate that there is an absolute in order to live all together. That's the reason why even in the 1789 revolution, you have the supreme being, the idea that there is an absolute, but you don't define this absolute as something being particular, as something written in a specific tradition. It's interesting because it looks like the first principle of Pascasarjana as you describe it in the 1789 revolution. It is in it. I'm not inventing it. You have that also in Rousseau, all those supposed to be father of modernity. So the main idea when we talk about neutrality is to try to conform to this idea that we have to respect the freedom of expression. That's the reason why in the French definition, in the French motto, what you have even on the I think I saw it, yes, look, liberty, equality and fraternity, and as you can see, liberty is first. Liberty is first. So when the Act of Parliament in 1905, that was the liberal part, that was actually coherent with the French history. And it's not true what they are saying now. Oh no, we are getting out of some kind of pure or I don't know what laicity, because when you want to come back to pure laicity, it sounds a little bit like religious coming back to something that was supposed to be pure, that we never saw actually, really, in history. And so, now, what happened really in 2003, why do we have this change in the way we see what is laicity, not only with politicians, with political parties, but also in the general public? What really happened? And what is written in this report? It's always nice to read what is written in reports. It is written, there is something really strange that is written. It is that a report that says, oh, there is a problem with our society now with religious matters. But the problem is so big, so deep, in a way so tragical, and I use the word tragical on purpose. I'm not using dramatical, but tragical. Because in a drama, that means that there is a problem and you can solve it. But in a tragedy, there is a problem, you know you can't solve it, so your gesture is like a desperate gesture. And so in a way, this report is like a desperate report. And is implementing a desperate program to save something that is supposed to be lost already. And what you read in it, it is that at one moment in history, and it appears maybe we have reached this moment, at one moment in history, religion, laicity and human rights are opposed to each other, are not opposed, are contradictory to each other. You can see that for what I've said before, that laicity is actually historically, philosophically, sociologically, a direct product of human rights ideas. It's a part of the human rights that concern the freedom of conscience, that imply the freedom of expression of this conscience, that imply the freedom of cultural, religious expression of this conscience. So it's a direct product. So what does it mean when such a young, authorized politician like François Baroin writes, at one point in history, it is contradictory, laicity is contradictory to human rights. What does he mean? And he needs to use this new word, new laicity. And what does it mean? It is a tragical laicity. It is a laicity that to make a gesture because things are bad, things are wrong. And what is wrong? You can see it after a while, people were talking about, oh, there is communitarism. What do you mean? People are living in communities? I mean, like human beings? You mean like families? Not something else. You know what I mean, people will say. And at the end you can see that it is the shadow of Islam. And it is not the shadow of Islam, in fact, as religion. It is something else. It is an expression that appears in the French public at the same time, almost at the same time, and almost all over Europe in the beginning of 2000. It's not Islam. It's not even Islamism. It's not even fundamentalism. No. It's the word, the expression, Islamization. It's interesting, because this word has two aspects. There is a quantitative aspect and a qualitative aspect. What I've tried to study it sociologically in the different environments, in public speeches and in the medias and the newspapers, etc. Even in Britain and in Germany it appears too, in Italy, in Spain, in Portugal. And so it means the quantitative part means something is happening like a natural event, like an earthquake, something we can't control. And it will be more like tide, something that is growing and we don't control. Islamization, something is coming, it's going and growing. And people will say, it's Islamization of our minds, Islamization of everything, if we could use it. I'm sorry to say that. I mean, it's not maybe very politically correct about my country to say that. That's actually what I observed. Really, it was in the public debate. And there is this quantitative aspect, but there is also the qualitative aspect. They mean, it's not only that they grow, but they do it on purpose. That's the qualitative aspect. They have an intention, a bad intention, behind the curtain. I mean, behind the veil. They have a bad intention. Because if it were only for the veil, who cares in a way? I mean, you have people in the French streets that wear things that are, I mean, more visible and ostensible than that. But the veil, what is it? Is there something behind? There is an intention. There is the idea. There is an intention. Otherwise, you will not care about it. You will not think even about it. You know? That's the reason why I'm saying we are not, you know, into Islamophobia. Specifically, I mean psychiatrically, but in Islamoparanoia. Because the difference between Islamophobia, phobia and paranoia, psychiatrically, is very precise. Someone that is, for instance, an arachnophobic, when he enters his room, is to check, no spiders, that's fine, if there's no spider. If there is one, or he's scared, so we just, you know, sweep it off. And if he can't do it himself because he's too scared, he can ask his mother or his friends or his neighbor or something. But when there is no, you know, spider, that's fine. The other one, who is arachnoparanoia, we could say, when he enters into the room, that's very different. If he sees a spider, he say, "Oh, this spider is here," but he doesn't see the spider as being there at random and he doesn't like it. He say, "Oh, it's here for something. It's here for me." I mean, this spider is here not at random. There is no randomness for the paranoia, right? And if he enters and there is no spider, he does not even believe it. Because he says, it's even worse. They are hiding because they are preparing something. That's part of their plan. And you can see now, in all the discussion in Europe, that it is that. You even had politicians that said that Muslims tried to convert French population, and the French population will be unaware of it because they put halal food in Quick and McDonald's and things like that. So people became Muslim even without knowing it. Marine Le Pen said that. She wrote that seriously, you know. You had someone like our Minister of the Interior, Manuel Valls. He said before he was Minister of the Interior, almost Prime Minister today. He said that there was halal shop, and it is a threat to neutrality and laicity. I mean, it's quite freedom of people. If they want to open an halal shop, and if it works, people buy their food. That's fine. I mean, no, he said we have to prevent from that, and we had all this kind of thing. I think we are getting closer to what is new laicity. New laicity is a laicity in a time of emergency. In a time we think it's emergency. I wrote a little article in Le Monde about that, saying laicity now, it's exceptional laicity, like when you are in a time of war, you have exceptional tribunals. Because you have to go very quick, and if there is a human rights problem, you can't deal with it, because we are at war, everything is wrong. So why are we considering we are at war? I give you other examples, some examples of the tendency from 2004. 2004 we have the law that prevents the veil for the students, which is contradictory of what I described before, the neutrality of the people that represent the state but not the public. But it was interpreted as, okay, in a way it's contradictory to laicity, because laicity is to allow people to do what they want in the limit of public order, you know, in the limit of the freedom of order, what we call also moral and physical integrity, not insulting, moral integrity, and not being physically doing something to someone. But we say, okay, it's public order, because it might be that the people that are young, they are they are less than 18, the majority age, so they can be manipulated, so it's to protect them. So that was a public order idea, in reality, more than the idea of laicity at all. Because in fact, it introduced religion in school doing that. Because if you arrive, you have to have a definition. Before we didn't have a specific definition. Because the definition of what is or is not a religion is of course religious itself. For instance, if I enter a school and I have a kippah, a Jewish thing, people will say, oh, get rid of it. But if I enter a school and I have a big T-shirt with a yin and yang, they will say, oh, that's fine, because it's nice, it's surfing, people are doing surf with that and that. Yes, sure, but where do you put the limit? So you introduce religion actually inside school. The 2010, again, we wanted to prevent a religious sign which was Muslim, the head to foot scar, but we couldn't do it because they were underage. So we said, oh, it's identification. Well, all our studies showed that all those women that were underage, when they were asked to show their identity, they always did. So basically the law wasn't a necessity. And so, but I say, okay, this time it's identification, again it's a public order. But if we accept that, we can accept it. But why do we have now discussion to say we want to prevent the simple veil inside universities? Because first, they are not underage. Second, they have their freedom of conscience and they are not supposed to be manipulated, or everybody is manipulated by, for instance, consumption society, publicity, or everything. You can extend the manipulation concept, right? So why do you do it? Why? Because there is no interruption of classes. Some people say yes, but they don't accept inside, they don't accept Darwinism or something. It's actually not true, and at least the student we have and the president of the national, the president of the different French university didn't find any matters for that. So to conclude, I will say that the problem is not about Muslims in France, because for instance, they have obeyed strictly the law of 2004. Everybody knows that they have obeyed it. So they didn't try to, even if they thought it was unfair, they did obey because they wanted to respect it. The problem we see is not from the Muslim community, it's about France. But it's not only about France. It's about all the countries in Western Europe that now have what we could call, and it will be my conclusion, don't worry, that we could call a narcissistic wound. Because European countries have been the center of the world for about 2 centuries, and they have step by step lost this position. Military in 1914, 1918, and after they have lost also economically with Bretton Woods agreement at the end of the 1945 war. But in 2000, exactly in 2003, actually, they have also lost their symbolic power, because it was the first time that the US entered in war without discussing seriously with Europeans when they went to Iraq. And after that, you have all those discussions about European identities, French identity, Netherlands identity, British identities, all over Europe in the same time. And in the same time, you have the focus on Islam. So until Europeans will not be able to build a new narrative to exist as a coherent continent, we will have a problem with Islam, with Islamization, because Islam has become the negative identity of Europeans. They don't know where they are, but they think they know what they are not, and they show Muslim as being, oh, it's what we are not. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Professor Rafael. This explanation is very fruitful and quite different from the majority of French scholars. This is, I think, and this is, maybe would be a hot discussion among French people as well. For this session would be question and answer, and I think the first is for Professor Bhatia because he has to leave us at 12. So if somebody has questions for Professor Bhatia, please raise your hand before giving to other three speakers. Yes, please. Directly. Microphone, please. This is only for Professor Bhatia because he is going to leave us. Okay, one. Please mention your name.
My name is Isan from Social and Politics Science, UIF. The sociology see the religion in fact in social and not see what they must do. I mean, see what happened in the social and not he must to do. Realistic, not idealistic. It's different from Akidah. My question is, there is reason why people in Indonesia not choose Islamic party. We know the PKS have a problem with corruption, and maybe is the one problem the Islamic party. Why they are not chosen by people? Thank you.
Thank you. Please, Professor Bhatia.
Yeah, but I don't quite understand the question.
Why the yeah.
I don't know the answer because the first time I participated in the general election, it was in 19. It was in 1977. I was an AFS student in the United States, and I gave my vote for PPP. I graduated from the Pesantren, you know, and I think this is a symbol of emotional ties there between myself and Islamic parties. I do not know what their agendas, and I do not know what their programs. But I think simply because I'm a Muslim and DPP is the only representation of Islamic parties, and I give my vote for this party. Now if you ask me why Pak Azumar didn't vote for Golkar, for instance, maybe, you know, maybe he saw more a lot better programs within the Golkar. And if you ask somebody else, you know, yeah, previously I gave my vote for Islamic parties, but now my Islamic parties disappointed me. Not only that they are unable to articulate your interests or aggregate your interests, but simply because they do not live up to what Islamic political aspirations are. So my question is, what is the difference between Islamic party and non-Islamic party now? All of them have representation in the prisons because of corruption, financial embezzlement, and so on and so forth. And all of them are for political stability, economic prosperity, respecting human rights. So there's nothing different. So this is the development of the political development in Indonesia in the last 15 years, simply that they are non-ideological. they become even more pragmatic, and I think let's explain the rest on why you vote for Islamic parties or you don't vote for Islamic parties, or why you vote for non-Islamic parties. So there is no rational basis in providing or in forecasting our support to any single political parties. What I've explained earlier is actually only on the secular trend. But the secular trend is not the secular, but this is the trend of the Islamic parties, in which their support are declining. And if those parties continue to decline in terms of their support, so my question is, why bother of raising a fearful voice every day? I remember a statement by PDIP politicians who says that the Islamic networks is more dangerous than pornography. How do you take account of that kind of statement? This is part of the larger effort to create what I call earlier the politics of fear with regard to Islam. But this is what you can observe in not too distant future, when we hold the upcoming general elections in April 7. I'm not sure if this answers your question, but this is what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, just we give Professor Bakar applause. Please feel free to ask your question, raise your hand, and you can ask the question in bisa bertanya dalam bahasa Indonesia, you can ask in English. Vous pouvez poser des questions en français. تستطيعون أن تسألوا باللغة العربية كما تشاءون. So please feel free. This is the academic debate. You can speak in your mother language and we can translate it. Okay? Please. 1, 2, 3, 4. Please give a microphone, please.
Yang mau nanya antri di situ.
Please. Sorry. The gentleman first.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Thank you very much, Dawes, because this is this nice situation. Yes. Sorry. To my parent, Muhammad Habib Israegas. I guess the French language in this campus. I am the doctorate degree students in this campus. My question is to Mr. Roland Dubertram. Yeah, it's very nice to meet you directly. I visited France in 2012. I guess the tense atmosphere in France was was the way like that. So I want to ask to Mr. Roland Dubertram. I think there is the contradiction between academic stakeholders in France, because I visited many universities in France, and government policy. Yeah. What you say, I think it's not come to your heart. Maybe in front of the ambassador. This is quite different with the Mr. Raphael. Did you like the contradiction you recognize like that? That's my first question. And then to my professor, Pak Ajumi Adra. Nice to meet you, Mr. Adra. I want to know what's the should Indonesian government take, Indonesian Muslim, it's to prevent the Muslim radical Muslim to hijack the term of democracy. I involved research. Many of the political prisoners who was released after the Reformation era, they play undergrounds to make the chaotic in our society in the banner of democracy. And then to my question to Mr. Adra, what's the bridge, the experience between France and Indonesia? What's the, we can get the conclusion and information, we get the lesson about the seminar today. And then to Mr. Rafael Liger, actually, honestly, I have to admit to you, I get many information about your explanation. Because when I visit France, I know there is tension about the Islam there. And then I just thought, why the National Party, the leader Mrs. Mary Le Pen, gets the growing support from the friends because the new laicity. Okay, new laicity was explained, and you don't want to say the neutrality administrative code, but neutralism. This is very, very important, informative for me. The question, sir, who is the winner? Who is the winner? The battle between the new laicite and the past laicite. The concept of the past laicite was backgrounds with the philosophy, religion, like that's what you explained, who's the winner next time. Because you know, the French community right now, there's very dynamic and very, very fluctuative sports about this. I think enough, my question. Thank you very much, the speaker. See you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Please, the gentleman with the podium.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bonjour mes amis.
Votre nom, s'il vous plaît.
Ok, mes amis francophones. Je suis très content de vous retrouver ici. Je m'appelle Syarif Mansour Ndiaye. Je suis sénégalais. Je suis venu